Welcome to the Healthusiasm podcast, a panel discussion on behaviors, innovations, and trends in health and self-care. My name is Christophe Jauquet. I'm the author of the Healthusiasm books and professional keynote speaker on health, business, and technology. Now, if you're new to the Healthusiasm podcast, you might wonder what Healthusiasm is all about. Well, Healthusiasm is the aspiration that we all have to be healthy and happy. And as a result of this, every company or organization is now more than ever focused on making their customers healthier and happier. And so every month I discuss with a panel of experts the positive changes that are shaping our health and happiness. This is episode number 18, and for this discussion we have three of your beloved experts in the panel. Calling in from Barcelona is our digital health connector, Aline Noiset.
Hola.
From Scotland, but living near Brighton, medical expert in digital innovation, Dr. Keith Grimes.
Like everybody.
And last but not least, from Ghent, Belgium, human experience expert, Mo Zouina.
Hello there.
Great to have you get back, guys. How are we doing today?
Very good.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Have you noticed that, the days are becoming longer now?
Yes, that's nice.
Which is nice, right?
Yeah.
What I also noticed is that the next time we record a session will be the 22nd of March, which will be spring.
Fantastic. It's been a long winter, a long and wet winter here in the UK.
Dark and grey in Belgium as well, yeah, indeed.
Well, very warm in Spain.
I will buy drinks for everyone. It's the day before my birthday.
Oh.
Deal.
Double reason to celebrate.
Lovely. Okay, so we have a great show coming up. And that show will be primarily about technology, or at least perhaps more than usually, I would say. Because in the last 2 weeks, some major technology updates were launched. Technologies that potentially might have or might be major game changers, perhaps also in health and self-care. And this is what we will be talking about in this podcast. More specifically, we'll be talking about OpenAI's SORA and Apple's Vision Pro, of course. But first, some Healthusiasm, some positive changes that will impact our health and happiness. So tell me, Aline, what Healthusiasm did you witness in the past month?
So it was one about the thermal earring. So it's smart wireless earring to monitor ear lobe temperature that has been developed by the University of Washington. So I think it's interesting because it's a newcomer in the wearable family. After the smartwatches, the smart rings, now we have the smart earrings. So a thermal earring has one sensor attached to the ear and another one that dangles slightly below and measure the room temp temperature. So it can actually differentiate between skin temperature and room temp temperature. It has a 28 days battery life, and it can be personalized with fashion design. And I think they look really, really pretty, like a normal earring. And what's interesting is that researchers found that ear lobe temperatures is more sensitive than the wrist temperature, for instance, and that you can notice variation caused by eating, exercising, level of stress, ovulation. So research is still early stage, especially around continuous monitoring of ear lobe. That's pretty new, but I find it very promising. So one use case, for instance, could be fever continuous monitoring to check if an antibiotic is efficient when you give it to a patient, or even detect if food are causing inflammation, so specific food when you eat it. So for me, it was something different in the already quite crowded self-monitoring space.
Yeah, and actually I saw that one as well, and I wanted to bring it in the unusual ones, asking you what is a typical device that we haven't healthified yet, and it's indeed the earring. What is also interesting, I think, because you mentioned temperature measuring, the thermometer is 150, 170, 80 years old. The fact that we need to have a 37 degrees or 36 and a half, which is considered the normal standard, also dates from that day. So the fact that we will have more and more devices that allows you to measure your temperature continuously, as you say, I think will be very insightful to know when are you actually sick. Is it 37, 38? Maybe for you that might be a rather normal temperature, and for others it might be very high.
I think if I just want to come in, one of the really interesting things about temperature is, of course, when thermometers were introduced originally back in 160 odd years ago, the medical profession pushed back very hard against this. They were very unhappy about this. They felt it was an unsafe and, strange way of trying to measure the illness of people. Now, of course, thermometers at the time were very, very large devices, very large mercury-based devices too. But once again, the pushback that we have from the medical establishment against new technologies is not new. It has happened for many decades, and it always makes me laugh. It was the same with the stethoscope as well. But yeah, so we have to hold people's hands as we enter this new world.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'll stay with inflammation, if you will, and I'll go back to something that we discussed in episode 10 on problematic media use. It's one of our most popular episodes. If you haven't listened to it, go on Spotify or Apple Podcast to find it. Episode 10. But here I'm talking about a research that is published now in the Journal of Medical Internet Research. And it showed that the use of social media is tied to inflammation. In fact, if we study the inflammation even 5 weeks after the use of social media, the levels of inflammation is still higher. And so again, this study shows or adds to the growing amount of evidence, that if you spend too much time on social media, you might risk have a negative impact on your health. It's part of a 5-year plan, if you will, where they really want to look deeper into that relationship between social media and chronic inflammation, because we're really talking about chronic inflammation, right? Not just the acute inflammation, but the really chronic inflammation, which is typically not visible in the same manner as acute inflammation, but it is detectable, and you need to, measure the blood, and this is what we see in this study. And this is very important because, chronic inflammation and definitely its long-term effects might have an impact on your cardiovascular health, on cancer, on diabetes, or even on mental health conditions, of course, which, So a very interesting study. It's not really a healthusiasm, but I think we can get to some healthusiasm if actually the study brings some very strong results and maybe might change the way that we behave with social media. I just don't like the fact that it's 5 years, because within 5 years, I'm not quite sure where we will be with social media, but definitely it is worthwhile thinking about. So yeah, I'll stick to inflammation and information. Maybe we go to Mo. You had something in that same direction, I believe.
Yeah, hold on to your pants, I would say, because weight loss drugs are trending. And what's interesting is that I found something that not only explains how the sales of weight loss drugs would add to the US GDP, but also the fact that the clinical outcomes realized by that drug would also add to the GDP. So some analysts have predicted that the market for weight loss drugs could reach 100 billion a year by the end of the decade, with Ozempic and Mounjaro leading the race. And the current wave of healthcare innovations like AI-powered drug discovery coupled to GLP-1 could raise the level of US GDP by 1.3% in the coming years. But what's also interesting is that thinner people means often fewer health problems and more workers. So that's also a fatter GDP. So the drug could indirectly help workplace efficiency and also productivity. So that's basically what it is. So the direct and indirect benefits of that drug, not only on clinical outcomes, but also on workplace efficiency, as Goldman Sachs says, could have an incredible increase on the US GDP. Now, the body positivity movement also raises ethical concerns, because are we swapping one set of problems for another? It's not about just slimmer wallets and thicker waistlines. It's about health, happiness, and societal norms. So maybe that would be for another discussion, and not everyone can afford these drugs. So positive, but also how interesting just one subclass of one therapeutic domain could add so much to the GDP and indirectly to workplace efficiency.
Yeah, totally interesting. And we've been talking about Ozempic and those kind of drugs for quite a while, and the impact that they had on different parts of society. I also want to talk about an impact on society, but more related to the information that we can gather. And actually, I want to go back to the Consumer Electronics Show from last month. It was held in Las Vegas in the beginning of January. Most of the time, it's a very funny solutions that we see there, which often creates reactions like what or why. I actually went through a lot of them. I didn't find anyone super interesting except the one that you brought up, Keith, last time, the Rabbit AIO, to go to the previous podcast to discover that. But there's actually one that I've missed that at first maybe did not seem a big deal to me, but then I came across some other articles, and when I looked a little bit closer, it actually might be a big deal. And it's related to what Abbott announced. They actually said that they would release in 1 year time about a new version of their Freestyle Libre, which is, of course, you might know, a wearable medical device that continuously measures your glucose. And it's a very valuable tool if you want to manage your diabetes, of course. Now, they announced a new version, which is called Lingo, but it fell under the radar because, to me at least, because it basically, if you will, a version 2.0 in many ways. It measures some new biometrics like ketones and lactate and alcohol. And the reason why it went unnoticed to me is because typically these companies like Abbott, these life science companies, they sell devices, or they targeted devices to physicians or for use prescribed by physicians. But now, as I could read in between the lines or in several of the articles, is that they might be targeting consumers directly. So the new Lingo devices is meant to be used and sold to consumers directly. That's how I understood it. And I know, of course, the Freestyle Libre was already indirectly sold to consumers through, several startups that are more consumer facing. But the fact that this big, mega big, because they're one of the biggest in the world, medtech company is potentially going directly to consumers would be a complete game changer to me. Everything remains to be seen, of course, but I'm very curious to know and to see how that market will evolve and whether they'll be doing it, because that would be super exciting to see such a massive company, medical company, going directly to consumers. Never been done before, I think, and not that I know of. But it would be having a major impact on how every one of us could actually measure a lot of things that we otherwise wouldn't be measuring. And as they say, it would help in the relationship with physicians.
It's a really interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think they've been looking at it and seeing, well, they're going through a middleman or a middle company to get to these customers. And I can understand why they're thinking, well, maybe we should just take that little middle person out and go directly there. And, I agree. It's a fascinating space.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the value is on consumables. Yeah. So if you get, it's not really, I think the algorithm is interesting, but the consumables are the recurrent revenue model, which I think they'll do a good job at that.
But I think that the most interesting part is that they're not used to put things out for consumers. The way that you do marketing, the way that you put things in the market, the investment level is totally different. And so it will be interesting to see how they would approach it if they actually will see this through. Keith, you had something related to information as well, I think, and the power of it. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, there's an information theme here as well. You were talking earlier on about social media and information can cause inflammation. Well, my Healthusiasm is about how information can reduce inflammation, specifically from a paper talking about information as a new independent determinant of health. So for those that want to see it, it was published just recently on the 13th of February in Nature. And within this, there was a discussion by a number of authors about how, particularly given the experience of what happened during the pandemic, that there's an increasing recognition that information in and of itself, the access to the information, the quality of the information, and how that information is connected, has a direct impact on morbidity and mortality, on illness and death. And I think if we think of all our own experience of having gone through the pandemic a few years ago, the critical importance of being kept up to date and the very changing nature of information until we got up to the vaccinations was the principal way in which we managed this. And studies have since shown that actually it was this information that had the biggest impact on morbidity and mortality pre-vaccination. And so recognizing this and going a little bit deeper is something I think that is adding evidence to something that people working in healthcare, and I think actually the wider population, have known all along. Knowledge and education and how we communicate information determines how well a person lives their life, how healthy they are. Now, whilst that's positive and it gives us a lot of hope about how we can use some of these new technologies to positively influence people, equally, it indicates the damage that things like misinformation, conspiracy theories, AI leading to fake information, all of that can have a direct impact on the health of the population, which is scary and needs to be managed. And then on the flip side of that, while information might be an independent determinant of health, it's really quite closely tied to the social determinants, which we're all increasingly aware of. And you just have to look at those populations that are either in poorer groups who have poorer access. One of the statistics was that 26% of Medicare benefit recipients do not have access to the data and computing they need to get access to this information. And then if you look in sub-Saharan Africa, up to the maximum of 45% of the population have access to a mobile or data network at all. So good news that we're understanding the power of information and we can put this into place. But unless we're careful, it's just yet another reason that some people might miss out. So I think it's a really interesting paper. It's a nice short paper too. And yeah, it reminds us of what we've already known, but it also reminds us of the power that we hold in our hands, those of us that communicate.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think what we sometimes underestimate is that people want to know. Maybe they're not in the position to understand, or maybe they don't always know because they don't have access to the information, as you said. But as I write in my second book now, is like one of the biggest life aspirations is consciousness, which is something different than awareness, right? Awareness is you might be aware of something, but not fully understand it, not fully comprehend it. But the fact that you are conscious about something means that you actually understand and comprehend it. And I think this is one of the things that we need to be working on very hard in health and self-care. I'll give the last one to you, Aline. You still had one you wanted to add?
Yeah, there was an interesting news in the women's health space. So it's a new menopause app that was launched by the Menopause Hub, which is the Ireland's first dedicated menopause clinic. And that app will allow women to track and monitor their menopause symptoms with the idea to help researchers to develop new treatments. And we know it's a big deal. Like menopause, we don't talk about it enough, and research is not here yet. So it will include information and research about the hormonal changes women experience during menopause and provide also valuable insights into the effectiveness of current therapies. And so the app was developed by the Dublin-based company Zendra Health and co-created with women undergoing menopause. I think that's very important as well.
Yeah, lovely. And again, we're talking information, data and information. I think all the Healthusiasms were almost about information, right? So this is one of the most important things that we see. To round this off, I have, per usual, some unusual ones. And I'll start with you, Keith. So we heard that Pluto is no longer a planet. But now, potatoes may from 2025 no longer be a vegetable. Why is that?
My goodness, potatoes. All right, I'm still reeling from Pluto not being a planet and then being a planetoid and so on. All right, okay, so potatoes no longer being a vegetable. Well, I suppose the first question is, what are they? I do know that potatoes are related to some very toxic plants who can be toxic themselves. My mother's a gardener and was warning me about deadly nightshade and belladonna and so on. So I suppose which way can they go? If a potato is no longer considered a vegetable, then are they going to be reclassifying it as a fruit?
Not as a fruit, but it's indeed a reclassifying, and it's driven by the US Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. And they're using 5 categories, right? Dairy, fruits, grains, protein, vegetables. Most of the time, what we say is that you need to eat most of all vegetables. But if you consider a potato a vegetable, then you might eat too much vegetables. And so what they want to do is they want to no longer consider a potato being a vegetable, but they want to turn it into a grain, or at least a stable food, if you will.
Understood. That does make sense. I understand that, yes, because Keith, a plate full of frites can be an issue.
Keith, you don't know what that means for the Belgian population.
Oh, I have a sense.
Potatoes not being a vegetable anymore. This is chaotic.
Dramatic.
And also potatoes not being a vegetable means that vodka doesn't count either.
By the way, Pluto is technically a dwarf planet. And the reason is because it still has, in its near region, other objects flying around. So normally planets have already absorbed those asteroids and space rocks that are very close to it. And so they discovered there's a lot of things going on and around Pluto, and that's why they don't no longer consider it a planet. To you, Aline, one for you. What is tree.fm? Tree.fm. It's as in a tree. What could it be?
.fm. I would think of a radio channel.
Correct. Correct.
But 3 dots?
It's a website, so it's tree.fm. What could it be?
I don't know.
I'm going to say maybe this is a website that has wired up a tree and broadcasts the electrical activity within a tree as a radio signal.
No, but that sounds pretty fascinating.
Maybe it's just the sound of the wind going through the leaves that calms people down.
Yeah, so actually what you can do, I mean, people upload on this website all tunes from the forests in the neighborhood. And you can use those sounds to escape, to relax. That's kind of like more like a meditation website. So it's indeed tree.fm. as in the tree that grows from the ground up, .fm. Mo left the most difficult one for you. It's very hard to guess it, but there's a link to our previous show which was on love, sex, and relationships, where you made a statement about we're having less long-term relationships, we're even having less sex. But I'm happy to tell you that a guy from Russia used ChatGPT to find his wife. What did he do?
What did he do? He found ChatGPT to find. He used ChatGPT to find his wife.
He used ChatGPT in some way to find some form or other to.
What do you mean find his wife? Did he lose her?
He got out of a relationship and he wanted to find a new wife.
Okay.
And within 2-3 years' time, he did find a wife and got married to her.
Like a real person?
Like a real person, yeah.
Maybe he asked ChatGPT the best way to approach the problem, and then he systematically upped his game.
That's a good one. It's close. I mean, what he did was that he programmed ChatGPT to swipe through Tinder. And so he automated everything related to Tinder. And he got about 5,239 matches. And it was trained in that way that it matched his preferences. So he filtered out profiles with photos of alcohol or zodiac signs in their biographies or any other nuances so that he can immediately find a certain match. And then ChatGPT even had the first conversations with the women to see whether it really matched. So he went through about over 5,000 women, dated hundreds of them in 2 years' time, which is considerably well done, let's say. And then after a short while, he took over the conversations from, on Tinder when they were lasting a little bit longer, when ChatGPT was kind of like approving what was going on. And then he actually found out that she wanted to marry him, and he did pop the question.
For a minute, I thought this was like a modern retelling of Cyrano de Bergerac.
Anyway, thank you for all your Healthusiasms. And yep, it is a Healthusiasm world indeed. So many positive changes are making our world a little healthier and happier every day. If you want to know more about these Healthusiasms, go to healthusiasm.com, discover the other episodes, and subscribe to our newsletter. But now let's move to the next segment of the Healthusiasm podcast. Is it something, nothing, or everything? Every month, one of the panelists brings an idea, innovation, or evolution forward that sparked their Healthusiasm. The rest of the panel will then debate and share their opinion about it. Do they find it something, nothing, or everything? And this week's topic is actually one we all suggested, basically, because it was all over the news. We all saw it on social media. And actually, we already talked about it when it was announced in episode number 12 on healthcare markets and neurotech. It was part of one of the Healthusiasms then. And so I'm talking about the Apple Vision Pro. Because then, 6 months ago in June 2023, it was announced, let's say. Remarkably enough, when it was announced during the Apple event, there was no health or fitness mentioned in the entire launch. So as it is now launched on the 2nd of February, I am very curious to see the potential that we might potentially find with this device, because it is now available for purchase. So some of you might have tried it already, or you might have seen it on social media, because it was very funny. You could see people sitting in the metro with the headset on, walking over the street, or even driving a car with it, although the last one was actually a hoax. So I think you must have lived under a rock if you haven't seen it yet. But just for good measure, if you're not 100% sure what I'm talking about here, the Apple Vision Pro is in fact, or it looks like, a VR headset that allows you to experience mixed reality experiences. So what this means is that it integrates digital objects into the physical world while you navigate your real life surroundings. There's 8 outward-facing cameras that project the outside world onto a 23 million pixel interior screen. So you're really watching real life as real as it potentially can be right now with the technology available. And it only have a delay of 12 milliseconds. So you're actually not really seeing 100% through the glass, but you're watching what these 8 cameras are doing. And in the meantime, you have a digital overlay, let's say, where digital objects are placed into that real reality. And you can actually, of course, interact with these digital objects as if they were basically in your physical space you are walking in or sitting in. And you can interact with these digital objects by using your hands, your eyes, or your voice. So it's quite a remarkable tool, quite a remarkable innovation. And so my question really was, and I think we all have that question, even though there was no mentioning of healthcare or fitness in the launch of the Apple Vision Pro, what do we think now, as we've seen some videos, maybe even tried it ourselves? What do we think could it mean to health and self-care? And maybe let me just directly go to the doctor in our midst, Dr. Keith Grimes. What do you think of the Apple Vision Pro, and what do you think, and where do you think that we will see it pop up in healthcare?
Well, as a person who previously went by the title VR doctor back in the mid-2010s, I am going to take a very positive view on all of this as well. But I'll try and be a little bit balanced on this. I'd love to have got hold of one. It's only really a sale in the US just now, and even using like sneaky tactics. The thing that stopped me getting hold of one is that I have to wear prescription glasses, which you need, and you need a US prescription for it, which I didn't have. So what I think about with the healthcare, I mean, the first thing to say is that the use of virtual reality, immersive technologies, AR and so on has been well explored in healthcare and is currently being used as well. So people are using VR and AR for simulation and training, for example. There's a lot of companies doing that right now, and it's entered normal practice. Patients are using it for meditation and pain and distraction relief, for distraction from painful procedures, for psychological therapies, and visualizing complex data. So it's already being used a great deal. The question, I suppose, is what does Apple's entry into this market mean about that? And I suppose there's a couple of things. The first thing is that Apple coming on board generally signifies a big company with a lot of money is committing firmly to this area, which means, I think, confidence for people that are building solutions in that area, particularly health. So I think it's good news from that side of things. I think the other thing that I'm really, really pleased to see is that Apple coming on board brings Apple's famous attention to design and user interface and accessibility as well. And you spoke a little bit about the controls there as well. I haven't had a chance to use this device, but I understand that it does a fantastic job at gaze tracking, being able to sort of control a user interface with your eyes. And for some members of the population who have disabilities or maybe paralysis, that technology coming on board in an accessible form is actually going to be really, really positive. And I do know that other friends of mine who have other accessibility issues have always spoken very highly of this. So I'm really, really happy to see that side of things. And I suppose the final bit before maybe hand over to other people is that Apple coming on board does the same thing as Apple coming on board did with smartphones. There were smartphones before the iPhone, of course, but Apple coming on board brought a little bit of kind of magic dust to it as well and really increased the acceptance and uptake of this. And I think the use of VR and immersive technologies in health has been limited by the lack of penetration of these devices to a wider population. So I think that's a really positive thing to be looking at as well. You know, Apple's kind of, you know, they're not doing anything terribly new here. People have been doing VR for a while, but what they are doing is they're doing what they've done before, which is dropping some of that Steve Jobs kind of Johnny Ives, Apple magic over the lot of it. And I think that's good.
Yeah, totally. And I think you made a reference to the iPhone or to the phones in general, but I think the smartwatches is even a better example, right? Mm-hmm. When the first smartwatch came out, people said, oh, this is not going to work. I mean, why is Apple venturing in this? But if you look today, 50% of the watch market is Apple. Like the watch, even including the Swiss watches, right? So yeah, it's same for me, right? So this is exactly what Apple brings, and they bring a sort of experience, as you say, user interface, which is a lot better. What I really liked also about what you say is the gaze traction, so the eyes movement that might be very strong in this with this device. And what I've already written or read somewhere is that apparently there's already studies started with the Apple Vision Pro to see what we can do with it to diagnose certain diseases better. Because depending on how you move your eyes, so the eye tracking technology that is in this device could identify certain different patterns in the way that you move your eyes. And it might help with early warning signs of vertigo, of stroke, dementia even, apparently. It's not medically approved yet, but it's definitely something that people are starting to set up studies around. I think even in the Essen University Hospital in Germany, they are actually doing this type of research.
That's fine. I still remember large parts of my medical training were being trained to diagnose and interpret different diseases based on the movements of eyes as well. And that's limited by my ability to remember what I'm testing, but also the fidelity of it as well. And so, yeah, absolutely. Early warning signs of neurological degeneration,
Exactly.
how people interact with things. We've now got this extremely rich data set coming on board, which a little bit like Eileen was saying earlier on with the temperature, we've got this enormous amount of information to allow us to better understand health and wellness. So, yeah, so I'm sitting on the positive side here.
Mo, where are you sitting?
Well, I think it will be something, but I think it also confirms something that will become everything. Let me explain. I think it's the merger of devices and the body that are gradually becoming closer and more intimate with who we are, with the final disappearance of the device and us becoming the interface. So let me guide you a bit on that, because I see you frowning, Christophe. I think we will become the interface, and that our entire environment will become the UI. We talked about humane. If there's two names you can look up, it's Patty Maas, who is a lead scientist at MIT Media Lab, but also look up John Underkoffler, who in 2010 did an incredible TED talk on the disappearance of the UI and the new UI. He, John Underkoffler, is the scientist they use for Minority Report, right? And just recently, we just heard that the first human patient implanted with a brain chip from Neuralink appears to have fully recovered and is able to control a computer mouse just thinking about it. So I think it is something, but it's something that leads to everything. And the fact that it leads to everything is that the interface, the device will disappear and we will become the interface. Now that has consequences. If we become the interface, that means that we always say, I have been hacked, but it's never us, it's the device. So imagine Neuralink having the chip implanted to us, then we will really be hacked, right? So the consequences of high-level hacking there take on a completely different ballgame. And because we never had computers linked to our brains, which I think is the hacker's ultimate prey, and it's humanity's ultimate frontier. So as my friend Erwin Janssen would say, world domination could be closer than we think, right? But anyway, if we get already influenced by just looking at devices and interacting with devices, and if we become the device, I think that might become everything, both from a technological breakthrough, both for humanity, but also for power play. So that's my take on it. I think the Apple Vision Pro is something, but it's something that confirms that it's becoming everything.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And by the way, Patty Maas is the sister of my former colleague, Eric Maas. So I was introduced because Eric knew that I was very into health and innovation in general. And so he presented me already, I think it was 2007, 2008, the work that she was doing. And then it went all in that same direction. And it was, totally, I can't even find the word. I was flabbergasted by everything that I saw in 2007, 2008. Remember, those were the days where not even our smartphones were working optimally, right? Yeah, pretty amazing stuff. And indeed, as you say, the interface, I think Humane is a great example. Last month, we talked about Rabbit. Keith, you brought it up. The large action models, where actually we don't need a phone anymore, but it's automatically actions are instigated, if you will, based on what we think or what we just simply say to it. So yeah, I think it will radically change. It definitely is something. Wouldn't you agree, Aline?
Well, I would actually agree with Mo that it's the beginning of something. So to be honest, I was not really mind blown by the launch and the news of the Vision Pro. As Keith was saying, for me it's nothing new. We've been seeing that in the healthcare space. We've been talking about it for many years. I remember 10 years ago, I was in Silicon Valley and I visited a company that was doing something similar. So yes, the technology is more advanced today, but the concept was already existing 10 years ago. That there's an image that I'm always presenting when I'm doing workshop talking about trends in healthcare, which is exactly that, no? So we've been waiting for that to be put in place, but I don't know. Maybe I was expecting something a bit more exciting. And also for what I read, the comments from the people. So there was actually quite some people who returned their headset. So there are 14 days to return the headset. And the percentage of people that did was quite high. It was interesting to read the comments. So one of the reasons why I'm not really using VR headset is because it gives me headaches and it hurts my eyes. And that's exactly what I read. So I'm like, well, we're still in the same. I think the revolution will come with those devices when we can actually fix that. And I think also that the price is also a barrier. So it's costing $3,500 per headset. So not everybody can afford those devices, no? And what people were saying is also that the device is actually quite bulky. So I know you talked before about Apple being very good at design. And maybe on this, I was a bit disappointed. So they commented on the weight of the device. I would very much on the front of the head and also the straps that were not very well fitting. Yeah. And also, Christophe, you mentioned when we saw the pictures of the people that were using the device, like being in the metro and being like working using the Vision Pro, that scared me a bit. I'm like, well, maybe the black mirror is here. And it feels like this will isolate people even more. Like we are losing the connectivity between the people. They are in their own world. And also something that reminded me when I thought about that article. So I was mentioning to you that I give classes regularly, and I always use that example, what we would be able to do with VR or AR glasses to be in the real world and to have some information displayed about the patient in front of us. And one student made a comment that I thought very interesting. Is like, Aline, this is super interesting, but who is entering the data that are being displayed? And I thought that was a very interesting point. So it's nice to have the technology, but we need to think like the information that's being displayed, where is it coming from? And that's actually what will matter more than the technology itself at the end.
Yeah, that's true. It's always, I mean, technology is only the gateway, and it's what you put in or what you do with it that actually makes a difference, of course. I also heard that it was pretty heavy, and from people that actually use it, I know some guys that actually used it. They say it was not entirely fun to wear, definitely not for a long time. What was remarkable, I think, was that, and I don't think I've ever seen that before, but Mark Zuckerberg and some of the C-level people from Meta, they actually tried the Apple Vision Pro, made a video of it, and say like, look, I don't think this is a good product at all. So I never seen another company, because Apple Vision, Meta also has, the Meta Quest 3 now, which is also see-through, which is a bit of a similar device, a little bit more less user-friendly maybe, but anyways, what they say is this is way too expensive, price value for your money you don't get, and actually our product is way better. So I never seen C-level people from another company having a rival device actually going straight against it. I mean, this I think is never really done.
I think Mark Zuckerberg has spent too much time in the octagon. He's using his sort of MMA experience and now starting to have that kind of trash talk. But I was smiling when you were talking there, because I was going to make that point. It is interesting to see this. And actually, I think Mark Zuckerberg makes some really interesting points. I've had a Quest 1, Quest 2, Quest 3. I've got the Quest 3 just now. I love my Quest 3. I use it a lot for exercise. I use it a lot for meeting friends and playing walkabout mini golf and having medical business meetings in VR. But I don't do it all the time. Quest 3 does it perfectly well at 1/7 of the price, with an enormous amount of content out there as well. So I actually think that in this situation, Meta has kind of judged the approach better, but they're of course iterating and testing their assumptions as they go. And of course, we all know this is a very good way of doing it. I wouldn't bet against Apple on this one. Apple have got their own way of doing it. But I think for now, I'm still pretty happy with my Quest.
Yeah, and the Quest 3 is twice as expensive as the Quest 2. So they're getting more expensive as well. So I think the Apple Vision Pro will probably become less expensive. So they'll meet somewhere in the middle, probably at some point. But I think what is most remarkable, I think, with these devices, and that is something I think which is not talked about enough. I mean, we used to have a computer in front of us. We're behind our computers right now, probably. The smartphone was a handheld computer, basically. Now we are going into an era where we have a wearable computer, where and this is something entirely new, right? And as Mo is also saying, it will allow us to have a completely different way of interacting with computers. The human computer interaction will radically change, and having that overlay, that digital overlay that we will have, I think it's a game changer in that regard. Whether the device is already up to standards and whether the experience today is good enough to actually replace a lot of things today, maybe we're not there yet. But the way that we will be computing and the way that we will be, dealing with a lot of solutions will radically change. And I think also in healthcare this might happen. I think I had a whole bunch of, and you mentioned quite some already, Keith. Telemedicine might be interesting. Education might be interesting. Chronic pain management already is the case with VR, mental health treatments, virtual rehabilitation. As you said, you were doing some exercises. It could even perhaps one day help people with visual impairments. So if you can't really see that well, you can put the similar kind of glasses on. Or, and this is the last two ones I really liked, is it could help with early diagnosis because our images that we take, radiology, whatever it may be, become better and better. You could actually use a Apple Vision Pro to go in that image and really look at the lesions, for example, skin cancer, more closely, and even maybe almost in a 3D version at some post. Dental health, same thing. And then finally, and that's something I really liked as well, monitoring of patients in wards. Imagine if you can have a Apple Vision Pro on your head and you see 4 or 5 different patients' vitals in real life while you still are working and you don't need to sit behind the computer all day. Maybe the device is not good yet to be walking around with it all day, but imagine if you can have like the 4 or 5 different patients that you are monitoring in the wards and all their vitals live in front of you.
Maybe a final thought, Christophe. It's the first time Apple has launched a first product of anything that is called Pro. That means that the next will not be Pro, the iteration, and maybe be cheaper, right? So I think that's also really interesting. I think they have an excuse to ask $3,500 for it because it's a Pro. So that maybe says that what will follow will not be Pro and maybe more accessible. And then lastly, go back a few movies of the 80s and 90s and look at the mobile phones in Miami Vice or anything else. You had to have a backpack to wear these phones. So I think it's just a start.
Yeah, totally.
I think, mobile phones peaked with the Nokia in the Matrix, though. I think we've been going backwards since then.
Anyway, it's clearly something, but definitely time now for something else. In this Healthusiasm world, we see the boundaries of industries blurring between the worlds of healthcare, wellness, and consumer business. This brings the following question: what behavior, innovation, or trend from one industry can be worthwhile for another industry? Or in other words, what should we bring inside out or outside in? Tell me, Keith, what is the idea, innovation, or evolution that you would consider bringing inside out or outside in, please?
Well, earlier on, we were talking about information and the importance of how it affects healthcare. And so this last week or two, I've been really interested in seeing how information could be conveyed in an entertaining and fun way. And that's video, of course. And the big news of the last week, in fact, I think it is literally the last week, it was on the 15th or so, is SORA. And SORA is the new video generating AI from OpenAI. Now, we've already seen image generation using diffusion models from things like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and OpenAI themselves with DALL-E. And people have naturally wanted to say, well, if we've got these images that we can create using text prompts, maybe we can create video doing so. And over the last year, we've seen some pretty impressive and interesting short clips, maybe 3 or 4 seconds, initially kind of strange. And there was a funny meme of Will Smith eating spaghetti, which illustrated just how bad things started out. But SORA came along last week on the back of Google announcing another big thing and just laid out the most incredible videos, 1 minute in length, up to 1 minute in length, high definition, really astonishing images generated by AI and this model called SORA. And you may have seen some of these images doing the rounds. I'd encourage people to check in the website or seeing some of them, but really jaw-dropping stuff. And they published the prompts, the instructions that they put in place to create these. So, a view of an old gold rush town, a woman walking through the sort of rain-soaked districts of Tokyo. And, if that wasn't impressive enough, they also showed how videos could merge into other videos, could be edited with a simple text. So you could have a car driving down a canyon and you can say, make this car drive through a jungle, and it would update this and so on. So really staggering stuff. And of course, everyone's been excited and terrified in equal measure. But like all things, I immediately started thinking, well, this is all great, but I want to be able to officially use this in my day job. How can we bring this into healthcare? And so I spent a bit of time thinking about this and posted a short article on it, looking at how you might be able to use it in healthcare. And I think there's a lot of different ways in which the creation of video in an easy and high quality way could help. And I think it'd be interesting to hear what other people think about that. For me, when I'm working with patients, one of the common things is that if I'm trying to explain something complex, I'll draw them a picture if I don't have a picture aside, or I'll sometimes use this. Now, I have tried to do that with DALL-E, but it hasn't been terribly useful. But my pictures can be pretty awful as well. Imagine if I was able to create videos illustrating disease processes, illustrating the problems that people have. I think that would be tremendous at communicating information and helping people not only better understand what's going on, but why they should address things. So I'm really excited about the idea of bringing it to help me communicate with my patients.
Yeah, it totally is. You want to ask the question to somebody what ideas they have?
Well, I mean, so the thing is, I can spend a lot of time thinking about all these different things, but I'll have my own particular biases in this one. So I don't know, assuming everyone else here was aware of the launch of SORA, I'd be interested to hear what they think about how it might be used in health and wellness. So Aline, I'll come to you first. What were your thoughts about the launch and how it could be used?
No, I thought it was very interesting. Actually, the application I see was related to yours, but a bit different, because I was thinking about the patients, but especially in the case where patients are being hospitalized and they are discharged from the hospital and they need to follow a specific follow-up care, or patients who have a specific treatment. I was thinking, for instance, patients who have a subcutaneous injection treatment. That's a bit tricky. So those patients, they need to go to the hospital the first time. A team of nurses or doctors will show them how to inject properly. But then the issue is that those patients are going home and then they remember what they remember. And the healthcare team doesn't really know if they're doing it properly. So if they can actually go home with a video showing them exactly how to do it, they can just refer to the video. And I think that could really increase the adoption and the adherence to the treatment. And something else I was also finding very interesting thinking about that is the possibility to personalize the videos of this patient based on the inclusion. So if the video is if the patient is a young boy, we will have a young boy in the video. If it's a young girl, a young girl. If it's Asian girl, Asian girl. If it's an old dark skin color man, exactly. Because I think that's also, it's important on the way we see each other or we identify in the videos. And when you do treatment and we have to do, I don't know, about the subcutaneous injection, maybe it's not the same like a very thin person or overweight person. So I think that would also help.
Yeah. So it's almost like it's the same excitement that we have about the ability to be able to easily translate, to not only translate simply to the language that's used, but also those things that make a person feel that this has been more personalized to them, something that's really beyond the realm of doing this at scale for anyone, unless you pick certain groups. So there's even an element of increasing the diversity and equality of access to this information. I agree. I think that's a really interesting use of this technology. How about you, Mo? You've always got interesting takes, different takes, but I'm interested to hear what you have to think of this.
Well, I think we're looking at it now where we prompt and we wait and we generate an image. I think this will speed up considerably. And I think we can generate video content on the spot. And what if we could generate, and automate that? What if physicians could add video to their prescription? So based on what has been prescribed, we could see the extension of a consultation, for instance, where we see physicians being challenged for time. And then when you go home, the consultation is continued with the virtualization of your physician, with everything he or she wanted to say, but didn't have time to do. So, and imagine the data of what has been prescribed linked to the content that would be generated by your physician to continue talking about your therapy, for instance. And then lastly, I think if we would be able to cross patient files and patient profiles with video generation, I see a direct use in our pain clinic where we know that mind therapy has an effect on acute pain or even chronic pain. So when people wait in the pain clinic, we could already, generate some images. And then there's a link with Apple Vision Pro and the generation of SORA, for instance, right? Where we could help them with mind therapy. So I think if we look at it now, it has an incredible potential. But I think if we think about the next step where video could be instantly generated and tweaked and personalized, I see a possible extension of the HCP's consultation and being able to service more patients in a personalized manner, because we know that compliance, if it's your patient talking, if it's a physician talking, right, with the voice of the physician, and that compliance and adherence is also better.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I agree as well. And also what you're saying about that link back to what we were talking about with the Apple Vision Pro. What was interesting is last week we had the release, I think it was on the 15th, of the videos. And then the first thing was, well, there's no sound on this. By the 18th, 11 labs had released a way of prompting and using the Vision to automatically add sound to these videos as well. And then they talk about world building in the video, the idea that you can use these to create spaces. And then you start thinking about 3D spaces that people can orientate. If you integrate these videos with the wonderfully named technology of Gaussian splatting, you can create 3D models. So you have a pipeline from SORA to navigable 3D spaces, which could be used by a device like the Apple Vision Pro. So yeah, once again, we all get our cyberpunk futurism kicks off this. But the really exciting thing is thinking about how it can actually change people. But Christophe, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on actually change people, and also on what both Aline and Mo was saying. While listening to them, I kind of merged both of their ideas. And what we could do, for example, is instead of having your physician talking to you after you've left the consultation, what we could imagine is that it's not the physician, but it's yourself talking. For example, what if you would continue smoking for another 20 to 30 years? How would you look? Well, how would your physical health capabilities be? Maybe we can make a 20-year-old version of yourself that is talking to you in a certain environment and showing you the real consequences of certain, behaviors that you had. So I think I was thinking in that regard, maybe. And maybe also, and this is the exercise that I did prior to this pod, is that last month we talked about synthetic memories. Remember, Keith, I asked you what are synthetic memories? Well, there are visual representations of what we can remember made by prompting AI image generators. And they are used now to help patients with dementia so that they can more easily remember their own memories. And by doing that, by seeing these pictures, people felt, again, their own identity back. They felt better. It was an enjoyable experience and so forth. And so this is going back, but if you actually do this with videos, you can, instead of showing them a picture, you can show them a 1-minute video today about how their life was based on their own memories, which is very enriching. So I think these videos can both work in going back in time to help people feel better about themselves and maybe remember things from the past based on some vague memories that they still might have, or we can forward them into the future and showing them how certain things might impact, or certain behaviors might impact their health. I see two things here. The possibilities are just simply amazing.
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting hearing you talk about time as a tool here, either going backwards and going forward. And in medicine, I think that means that naturally, Christophe, I'm going to have to call you this week's Doctor Who, who's able to use time in the treatment of health and wellness. But yeah, I mean, there's so much to go into in this. I'd encourage anyone to have a look at it and have their own thoughts about it. There's lots of challenges, of course. Hallucinations in a visual model could have really big impacts if it's used for healthcare. Copyrighted materials still hasn't been resolved just yet. So I think we have a way to go. But even so, this is exciting stuff, Christophe.
It is exciting. And what shocked me the most, basically in the last week, is seeing all the reactions to it. And mostly the negative, or the fear that is related to it. And which I mean is that 1 year ago, we were talking about ChatGPT 3.5 maybe, February. I don't know. I can't remember exactly. Right now, we're talking about videos of 1 minute long made by a prompt that is just simple sentence. So we are slowly beginning to see the impact that AI is having and the speed at which it is coming. We're talking intelligence. I mean, we don't have a monopoly on that. Creativity, we no longer have a monopoly on that, and very soon emotions, right? And so there were, a lot of people on Twitter, on social media that said, look, I've dedicated my whole life on crafting videos, on making videos, animations, and I mean, I'm no longer valuable anymore. So this is going so fast, and the people that I saw reading some stuff were really, really sad and in fear. I had a lot of fear related to that. So thank you all very much for these smart words. It's time to wrap up the Healthusiasm podcast for this month. Thank you for listening. If you liked this show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. And for now, I would like to thank our own thought leaders for their insights and Healthusiasm, of course. Thank you, Keith, Dr. Keith Grimes, Aline Noizet, and Mosouina. My name is Christophe Jauquet. We are the Healthusiasm panel, and we'd love to see you again next month for some more Healthusiasm. Ciao.